Great Britain. If there's one thing I've learnt from staring at hours of drone footage on YouTube, it's that Great Britain, the largest island of the British Isles, is actually quite big. From the valleys of Wales to the Highlands of Scotland, the sunny Cornish coast to the rugged Cumbrian fells, and the dozens of cities dropped onto the landscape between, the diversity displayed by this one island is spectacular, and it's inspired me. I want to follow in the footsteps of many others before me. I want to attempt a challenge I once thought was beyond my reach. It was only when I performed the Yorkshire View expedition that I started to think it was even possible. I want to cycle the length of this country, south to north, from Land's End to John O'Groats. Now, this is a challenge in itself, but I want to add a restriction to make it a little bit harder. There's something about the nomadic lifestyle of strapping a tent to your back and wandering around that really appeals to me. Mostly because it's cheap. And so I want to do the whole thing without using B&Bs or hotels. I can stop with friends and family en route, but most of the time, I'll be wild camping. This video is the documentation of our attempt. I'm no expert, but I'll talk you through how we went about it, so maybe some of you can give it a go yourselves. So come and join us, as we take on one of the UK's greatest challenges. So you might be thinking, I'm in the Yorkshire View outfit right now, my bike's behind me, I'm about to record an episode of Yorkshire View. Well, that's not quite right. Today I begin a journey of completely epic and ludicrous proportions. I'm going to attempt, and hopefully complete, the Land's End to John O'Groats challenge. Now this isn't the sort of thing you just go out and do, it helps to get a little organised first. The full journey is over 900 miles depending on your route, so you need to pack practically, and I actually brought quite a lot of stuff. Let's break it down. Roll mat, tent and sleeping bag, your essentials for wild camping. Cycle helmet and a midge hat to keep the insects off at night. Pair of joggers to sleep in, my keys, my wallet. Waterproof phone sleeve, now this is good, it clips into the handlebar and you can use it for navigation. Toiletries for me, toothbrush, toothpaste, sun cream, shower gel and a tiny towel. Toiletries for the bike, a pump, multi-tool, puncture repair kit and tape. I'd also bring a spare inner tube if you could find one. I couldn't though. You'll want a bike lock, chargers, and water bottles. And I brought a pair of headphones for the train. I also travelled with a bag of snack food as well, pasties, flapjacks, fruit, and that's just so I could eat if I went for a while without seeing a shop or cafe. And with all that miraculously stuffed into my saddlebags, I was ready to go. Better get a move and I got a train to catch. Got my bike to Land's End using only trains, our group opted for a different route. I'd booked slots on trains from York to Worcester, where I was going to meet up with the rest of my team for an overnight stop before heading down. Even though we weren't going to start until tomorrow, I couldn't help being a little nervous about the weather conditions I was travelling down in. What were we getting ourselves into? At the crack of dawn, we departed from Worcester, in a van. We had to do this because it would be hard to find a train which could fit all 4 bikes at once. Unfortunately, the van could only hold 3 people, so one of us ended up taking the train down.
Oh, okay.
Everything seemed to be going well, but as we approached Penzance, we had an unfortunate surprise with the weather. I am not liking the look of this. But when we arrived, the rain had stopped. We must have drove through the entire storm, which was pretty lucky. We dropped off our van and assembled the bikes in dry conditions.
And here we are! Well, 3 of us anyway. We've just used this Enterprise brand van to carry our 4 bikes down from Worcester to Penzance, which means that right now we are at mile -11 of the challenge. So, with that in mind, we're now going to move towards Penzance to capture our 4th rider, and then we will set off to Land's End.
It's actually quite tricky using 3 people to move 4 bikes,
We had to cycle one, run back, cycle the other, and repeat. Eventually we managed to leapfrog the bikes all the way to Penzance Station.
Well, despite everything, it looks like the sun has come out today. And we are with Dom now, who's scurrying away from the background. I'm wearing a cycling shirt for once. It's looking pretty good. And off to Land's End.
And so we were off. Only a 1 hour cycle to the true beginning of the adventure. Who would have thought it would be so difficult getting all our gear to the most remote point in England? But despite everything, we had done it. We had arrived at Land's End. Land's End itself turned out to be far more touristy than I was expecting. We explored the sights a little, met a nice couple who wished us luck, and even saw a lighthouse, but I was determined to get a photo of the Land's End signpost.
There's a cue for the picture. I think I can be a bit more clever than that. I'm going to get this picture without cueing.
Let me introduce you to the team. We have Dom, Paul, myself, and Andy. While everyone was important in the journey, my teammates will mostly be playing background roles in this video. After all, not everyone wants to appear on YouTube doing this.
Land's End marks the start of our Land's End to John Groats journey. It's exciting times. Let's do this. We begin our voyage. So far, so good.
The plan was simple. Get as far as we could with what little daylight we had left. If we could get 40 miles under our belt now, that would set us in a great position for the first full cycle day tomorrow.
Haha! That's brilliant. First and last. Wow.
The first task was retracing our steps back to Penzance, and lucky for us, we already knew this bit. We'd spent a long time getting started, so it was late afternoon by the time we got back here. From there we pressed on to Port Kellis in search of food, which is where we discovered our first obstacle. This is the Star Inn, one of very few pubs in this area. Our plan was to hit places like this for food, but when we arrived, they weren't serving. And these country roads aren't exactly lined with food shops. We had no choice but to press on, and to hope we had more luck at the next place we found.
We're gonna get some food. We feel we've earned it.
Eventually we did find food, although it meant cycling in the dark. At only 29 miles into our cycle, we had to stop. So we pitched up on a passing campsite. All we could do was hope for a better day tomorrow. We awoke in what turned out to be quite a nice campsite, and using my charm and street smarts, I immediately befriended a local.
Hello?
It wasn't quite the wild camping experience I was expecting, but at least it wasn't a hotel.
We are just striking camp on the first morning. We're about 35 miles behind schedule. But you have to remember we only did half day on the first day, so that is to be expected. You can see if we can make up some ground today.
After we struck camp, we immediately set off to Truro for breakfast. This place turned out to be a lot larger than Port Kellis, and we were actually spoilt for choice when it came to food. The gang ended up getting a coffee at a place called Kaku Chi, but I was keen to try something a little different.
When in Cornwall, eat as the Cornish do. Get yourself a Cornish pasty from the oldest Cornish pasty maker in the world. Dom and I have gone for massive Cornish pasties.
Oh yeah, you can tell it's proper by the way it's folded.
Great.
Have you seen the way?
How is it, Dom? It's huge.
Out of 10?
It's up there.
Okay, it's up there.
7. Good. Strong. Welcome to the beautiful town of Truro. And it was really nice when we arrived, but it started raining now just as we're about to leave, and we have some long hills ahead of us. So, yeah, not good.
One of the reasons we were being so slow was due to the terrain. If we look at the distance and climb from the hilliest episode of York Review, and we compare it to the journey between Truro and the next Cornish town, we find that Cornwall is actually 44% hillier.
It's relentless. We did some unexpected off-roading and ended up somewhere very surprising. So completely out of the blue, we've stumbled across the Eden Project, of all things. The rain wasn't too bad, we were all fed, and had even chanced upon a landmark. Things were going great. For a while. So, we have had an absolute disaster. Well, I've had a disaster. So, we're cycling along up a hill, pretty steep. I tried to do a gear change, and this is what my bike looks like now. So, this is all that's left of my chain. My chain has now snapped. We're in a bit of a dire situation, really. The plan is to go to Halfords and see if they can fit it on the day. Of course, it's Sunday, so most of the bike shops are closed. We get a taxi to the nearest one, and hopefully we can get back to cycling by the end of the day, because we are really far behind schedule at the moment. It was looking bleak. My uphill gear change had cost me dearly. Without a chain, the bike couldn't even limp along. In all my years of cycling, I'd never had a chain snap on me. I had no idea what to do. If Halfords couldn't sort us out, I'd be on the next train home. So I got in a taxi with Andy, and we hoped for the best. At the store, we were told the bike could be fixed there and then, but there was a catch. My old, worn-out rear sprocket caused the chain to snap in the first place. To prevent this from happening again, I needed a new sprocket, but none of the ones they had in fit my bike. There was one which could fit, but it would mean losing my low gears. In the hills of Cornwall, this would be especially challenging. But I had no choice. I replaced the sprocket, and with reduced capability, I rejoined the team. The ordeal took up a lot of time, and we didn't get much further. We stopped for a dinner of bar snacks at the Market Inn in St Clear, and after filling up on chocolate and crisps, and getting some weird looks from the locals, we set out looking for a place to pitch up. We found an excellent spot for day 2 camping. It's a field, middle of nowhere, and it's completely undetectable from the road. It's fantastic. Of course, you do have to get the bikes over a stile to actually get in, and that's a bit of a challenge. Masterful. Even though the campsite was nice, my chain drama had cost us quite a lot of time, and we ended the day only 74 miles away from Land's End. Things would definitely need to pick up tomorrow. Day 3 started with a major achievement. We had finally reached our second county. We've done it, gang. We finally left Cornwall. After this, things took a turn. The rain we were so carefully dodging finally caught up with us. We spent a long while sheltering under the sturdy canopy of the Lidford farm shop. Eventually we felt brave enough to venture out and passed through Dartmoor in style along the Granite Way. So we have finally arrived in Devon. We're on the Granite Way at the moment, trying to avoid some of the nasty hills that we've come across so far, and also we're very thankful that it stopped raining, because it was brutal before. We're all in our coats, we're too scared to take them off. It was intense. This route was a former railway line, which means it's very flat. Without the hills to contend with, we were finally making good progress. But even experienced video makers get too cocky. I wasn't paying full attention and my handlebars clipped the railing, throwing me off my bike. But I recovered quickly, and I'm not sure my teammates ever found out this happened, until this video of course. I was fine after my crash, but then Dom came off on a slippy bridge soon after, and he was a bit more scratched from it. After the Granite Way, we bought some medical supplies from Boots Pharmacy in Oakhampton. The back-to-back cycle days were also starting to take a toll on some of the team. Dom even bought a knee brace to prevent cycle injuries. After the Granite Way drama, things started to settle down, but later on we were struggling to find a campsite. Wild camping isn't exactly legal in England, so you need to find a spot which is out of the way. But all we could see were country roads and farmers' fields, with the farmhouse always nearby. Eventually we spied a public footpath sign and took a gamble. By hiding behind these hedges, we were invisible to cars coming from the bottom of the hill. We were very exposed from the other direction.
We just needed to remain undetected for a few hours until the darkness of night could hide us. By the end of day 3, we'd been battered by rain, hills and tarmac, but we had managed another 45 miles and reached 119 miles total. We were definitely making progress, but not quite at the rate I would have liked. With Cornwall done though, we were on track to make big gains tomorrow. We awoke in our sketchy campsite at the break of dawn and struck our tents before anyone noticed we were there. We heard some tractors pass by during the night, but no one challenged us if they'd seen us. The day started out with a bang. My tyre, that is. The gang noticed my tyre looked a little flat compared to their road bike tyres, so we tried inflating it. But it turns out hybrid tyres aren't supposed to go that far, and it burst. Once again, leaving me immobile. I'd also bring a spare inner tube if you could find one. I couldn't though. With no replacement, Andy and Paul left their bags with us and shot off to Halfords to buy a new one. This was a low moment for Dom and I. We were about 150 miles behind where I wanted to be. My bike seemed to have a disaster every other day, and Dom was starting to become worried about the condition of his knee. Even with the knee brace, cycling was causing his knee quite a bit of pain. We were hoping it would recover if we took it easy for a few days. To keep the dread at bay, Dom and I played a game of who can roll the broken inner tube furthest down the hill. I'm quite pleased I managed to find the actual hill on Google Street View as well. It's a pivotal point in the journey. Around an hour later, Andy and Paul returned. They had done it! They had found an inner tube which could fit my bike. Soon after, we rode on into Somerset, with hopes of putting the Devon drama behind us.
Goodbye, Devon. Hello, Somerset.
The hills were lower, the clouds less rainy. So far, Somerset was delivering. Little did we know we were heading into our greatest challenge yet. The Quantock Hills area of outstanding natural beauty was not like anything we'd faced so far. A 700-foot climb in 5 miles, when one of our teammates really needed an easy day. It was nearly 3 times hillier than Cornwall. It was too much for us. What followed was an hour of dragging heavy bikes up a mini mountain while dodging the cars we shared the road with. The views were stunning, but even when the road flattened out, it still didn't relent.
Oh, I thought the hills were over. Look how high up we are. How can there possibly be another hill?
These hills wrecked us. We waited in a clearing at the top to try and get some strength back. Luckily for us, it was all downhill from here. For the rest of the trip, the Quantock Hills became our elevation unit. 250 foot was half a Quantock, 800 foot was slightly more than Quantock. These hills really stuck with us. We picked up some really impressive speed on these hills. Dangerous, some might say. We had a KFC in the gorgeous town of Bridgewater, then shot off along the Bristol Road until we came across this beauty of a campsite just down a public footpath.
End of day 4 now. We had a few problems starting off with the day because my back tyre sort of exploded and Andy and Paul had to heroically rush to the Halfords to get it fixed. And we are a fair bit behind schedule, but given the problems that we faced, I think we're doing pretty well. And I think we're on track now to actually make some good progress and get some miles under our belts.
For all our problems, we have managed 73 miles today, taking us up to 193 total. We are finally starting to achieve a good pace. With a few more days like this, we could get back on track.
This morning we made the shocking realisation that we were actually camping on a floodplain because all the water is gone. There must be a tidal link to the via the River Severn to the sea. It's a pretty nice morning. Today we're going to try and push our luck and get actually into Wales itself by passing the River Severn. And from there we go north and north and north for about another couple of hundred miles and then we're there. It's easy.
It was an ambitious goal, but if we can manage 73 miles yesterday with the tyre drama, imagine what we could achieve on a day without problems. Our morning took us out towards the Mendits, home of Cheddar Gorge and apparently some unusual wildlife.
Hello, Mr. Peacock. How close can I get to you before you scarper? Come on. Come on. Stay in shot. Stay in shot. Oh, look, a peacock! A peacock in the Mendips. So currently standing in the Mendips, which is an absolutely beautiful area. I would be slated by the caving community if I didn't tell you that this is actually one of the caving hotspots in the UK. And it's pretty gorgeous around here, and there's even peacocks apparently.
We noticed Don was struggling, so we took an early lunch at the Congsbury Arms. Except we were too early, so we just ate pork pies in the car park. After a few more stops like this, it became apparent Don was not in a good state. He was in a lot of pain every time he bent his knee, and he was even taking painkillers. The strain of 5 consecutive cycle days had become too much to bear. Even then he tried to push on, but by the time we reached Portishead, we were all in agreement that this couldn't continue. We pulled into the Poacher. We had lunch in the beer garden and triggered the escape plan. Don's parents would drive down and pick him up with his bike, bringing him back to their house in the Midlands, and we would carry on. You'll notice these bits are in the animated style because the mood was seriously low here. It certainly wasn't the right time to stick a camera in people's faces, and also I wasn't even sure if I wanted to include this in the video. Don was optimistic. There was talk about him rejoining us when his knee healed, but for now, the gang had to continue with one man left behind. To escape Portishead, we passed over the Avonmouth Bridge, the first of the large cycle bridges on this trip. After this, we skirted around some of the industrial parts of Bristol, and eventually we spotted the Severn Bridge, our ticket to Wales.
Goodbye, England!
The Severn Bridge is one of 2 bridges along this stretch, and the only one we can cycle over. The other to our left was the Prince of Wales Bridge, and this is just an extension of the M4. This bridge is huge. It's actually a mile long. It took a long time to cross even on a bike. After we managed to get off the bridge and pass through a cool tunnel, we went straight for the Wye Valley. This was a really pretty area to cycle around, despite the weather. We had even stumbled across the stunning Tintern Abbey, but this appeared suddenly and we whizzed past it before I had a chance to film it. But then we had our second crisis of the day. I heard a noise while cycling through one of the valleys and turned to see that Andy and Paul had come off. Andy had struck a road obstacle and Paul had crashed into the back of him. Luckily the cars behind managed to stop and both cyclists had only minor cuts and bruises. Their bikes were a little beat up, but they were still up for the challenge. The day was clearly cursed and we were keen to put it behind us. As the sun set, we saw a footpath pointing to a field behind us and set up camp there. We finished the day with another 70 miles completed, 263 miles into our journey. A journey which at this point seemed doomed.
Start of day 6 today, and we're just breaking camp in the Wye Valley. The group morale took a bit of a hit last night. One of our teammates, Dom, was complaining about knee problems for a while, and they were getting pretty bad. He was on painkillers, he was on leg supports, sheer force of will as well, but it's still, we thought it was best that for his own safety that he took a few days off, so he's gone back home for a bit. Hopefully he can catch up later, but even as a 3, we still have to go on. We still have to do this. It is a charity bike ride. We've promised so many people, and so many people are watching. We have to press on. So today we're going to go to Hereford. I'm going to go a bit north from there, pretty much straddling the England-Wales border for a little bit, and hopefully we can get about 80 miles in today. That's the dream. Let's see if we can do it.
One of the main reasons we were continuing was due to the publicity. We were raising charity money on this trip for Shelter, the homeless charity, and the Cystic Fibrosis Trust. We were also giving daily updates to friends and family via Facebook and Twitter. With all eyes on us, we had all the motivation we needed to carry on into Hereford. It seems like we'd landed in Hereford on a market day, and actually seemed quite busy for 9:30 in the morning. The bull statue represents the Hereford cattle, a breed of cow originally from this area. We were making excellent progress today as we headed towards the Shropshire Hills area of outstanding natural beauty. This area was a little hilly, but it was no Quantock Hills, and we made quick work of it, eventually reaching Acton Burnell.
So you've just pulled into Acton Burnell for a quick water break, and I think I've left Andy and Paul far behind, but I had to speed off. My vlogging instincts took over the second I heard that this place had a castle. It's fantastic, look at the thing. I don't think Andy and Paul have any intention of following me here. I had to pass through quite a lot of track, like a minute on tracks, which you wouldn't be able to get a road bike over. Fortunately, I have a hybrid. The castle was built in the 1200s for Robert Burnell, the friend and chancellor to the king at the time. Come on, Stu, this isn't York Review. You need to go find out where they are.
After hanging around the castle for a while, we arrived in Shrewsbury for a quick dinner at the Wetherspoons. While dining, a pack of drunken, middle-aged women made a rush for our bikes, but they scattered when we stood up. It was perhaps the mildest confrontation of all time. We then travelled even further, looking for a campsite around Wem. This was challenging. There were farmhouses for miles. There wasn't even a bush we could hide behind. It turned out to be the sketchiest wild camp spot yet. We found a public footpath field, but the gate was overgrown and it looked like it hadn't been used in years. This would have been a good spot. No car could see you behind this hedge, but there was a catch. We were here, and there was a house here. Annoyingly, it had a window which pointed exactly where we wanted to be, but there was no light on in this window. Could we get away with this? This was the best spot we found after an hour of cycling, so we took a chance. And despite the lack of shelter, we pitched up. I said we wanted to do 80 miles, and we did 83! It was the first time we'd exceeded expectations. We finished the day having reached mile 346. All we had to do now was maintain this momentum, because we had a special treat in store for tomorrow. This morning we woke up at around 6 AM and had struck the campsite by 7. We survived the night, and despite our risky position, no one tried to challenge us. Even still, we were keen to move on, and we set off for the village of Malpass. We made a quick stop while we were here, and had a nice breakfast in the old school tea room. After that we were off again, this time stopping for lunch in Frodsham, where we ate a Subway by the railway bridge. By day 7, our early recklessness had given way to an efficient routine, where we simply cycled from town to town, grabbing food along the way. In fact, today's trip went so smoothly, this is the only clip I recorded all day.
Silver Jubilee Bridge! Right around this corner.
The bridge was our passage over the River Mersey, but we had some troubles actually reaching it on the bikes. We briefly teamed up with a kind stranger to find our way here, but she shot off once it was in view.
Friendly little tour guide, just up the street there. Didn't learn her name.
To our left was the Ethelfleda Viaduct, a bridge for trains, but we were going straight ahead. This turned out to be a short day, but this was deliberate, as there was something far more precious waiting for us at the end. We finished the day in my parents' house near Wigan, which just so happened to be en route. We had all the creature comforts we'd been missing, showers, beds, we even ordered some Domino's pizza. It was a much needed break from the harsh conditions of wild camping. And if some of my veterans in the audience think they recognise this plant, it's probably because you've seen it before somewhere. Even though it was a short day, we still managed 65 miles, taking us up to 411 miles total. With our spirits refreshed, we were ready to take on the rest of the trip. In the morning we shot off north, officially passing the border into Lancashire. We then continued north and stopped for lunch in the bustling city of Preston.
Alright, here we are now, day 8 in Preston. We've made so much progress lately, but I just haven't had the chance to record anything because we were going too quickly. We're up in the north of England now. We're actually in Lancashire, which is pretty cool. We spent last night in my parents' house, so we've had a chance to shower, we've freshened up. The morale is very high at the moment, and we're going to push on today, hopefully getting into the Yorkshire Dales. Back into the lands which I know best. Of course, I've never actually been that far west in Yorkshire, but you know, same thing.
Preston was a lovely spot, but we were soon on the road again, passing through the Forest of Bowland.
It's another area of outstanding natural beauty.
Keep up the good work, boys. After misgendering the dairy cows, which were clearly female, we entered another UK caving hotspot.
Finally, we're here! The Yorkshire Dales is an area which I will never reach on my York Review series, just because it's so far away from York that none of the towns in the Dales are within the scope of my show. So this trip gives me a rare opportunity to capture some footage of this beautiful area.
I was excited to be back in Yorkshire, even though the county was technically Cumbria.
It's been mostly sunny. We just have these scattered showers from time to time. No heavy rain though. We're very thankful for that. Barbon. This town is called Barbon.
Barbon is a Tier 7 village on the western edge of the Yorkshire Dales. Between 2001 and 2011, the area's population dropped by 10%, from 263 to 236. A fact which is so interesting, it's one of the 9 facts listed on their Wikipedia page. We just skirted around the outside of Barbon. We were in the mood for food, and we saw a bigger town looming on the horizon. Sedberg is a Tier 4 town lying a few miles north of Barbon. The area is officially recognised as England's book town, home to many used and antique bookshops. Books are everywhere here. Their tourist information centre doubles up as a bookshop. Even this random person on Google Street View can be seen holding one of Sedberg's many books. Dining space was limited here, but we managed to get a spot in the beer garden of the Dalesman. Now don't let these stock photos fool you. When we were there, the rain was really bad. We had to eat while huddled underneath the parasols outside. When there was a break in the rain, we shot off to look for a camping spot.
So the evenings are by far the most stressful time of day because we need to find a campsite. And our campsite has to fulfill a few pieces of criteria. Firstly, our tents can't be seen from the road. That's a big problem. We need big hedges. They can't be seen from houses, which is usually a problem because there are farmhouses like everywhere and we don't want them seeing us pitching up. We also need to avoid sheep. We can't go into fields with animals, which rules a lot of them out. We also want to be on flat terrain because we're very picky and we don't like sleeping on inclines. So that usually means that we're cycling around after we've done our day of cycling for about an extra 20-30 minutes. But tonight I think I have found a very good spot. Now the best way of finding these places is to look for signs like this. Public footpath. If you find yourself a public footpath, there's a chance there's going to be a gate you can be able to walk through. You'll probably end up in a field with surrounded by hedges, and you can just sort of plonk up your tent behind there. And that's what we've done. That's what we found to be our most successful technique so far, and that is how I found this beauty tonight.
With our spot secure, we climbed into the tents before the rain could return. Today we had travelled 75 miles and reached 486 miles total. It was another great day. Hopefully the skies would clear overnight and we'd have a dry, productive day tomorrow.
It's our first wet morning. It looks grim, but it's not actually that bad. It's quite cool. You can see the clouds on the hills.
But the clouds looked a lot less cool when we were actually in them.
Absolutely miserable morning. This isn't what you want to be greeting with when you wake up.
I don't have much rain footage. It's hard summoning the motivation to start recording in conditions like this. And I did feel quite bad making Andy and Paul wait for me to sort my camera stuff out.
Hey, just want to get some footage of the rain. People need to know.
As the man in front, I was also the one to shout out the road obstacles. Just the usual stuff you'd find on country roads.
That's all good. Sheep! Oh, I'm better at this hill than I am.
Things started to get a little better later on. We left Yorkshire and moved towards the Lake District.
So we've just pulled into Shap, which I'm very excited about for two reasons. The first reason is because this is where we crossed the coast-to-coast route, which we walked about 4 years ago. And secondly, it's also about the halfway point of the entire cycle. So we've done about half the distance now, we're doing very good, and the weather's cleared up as well. It's going to be a great day.
So far we were just about managing with the journey as a whole. We mostly followed Google Maps round niche country roads, but these weren't always good to cycle on. But as we started to leave Shap, we stumbled across a game changer. The A6 was actually small enough to cycle along, and then we were flying up the country. Before we knew it, we had already reached Carlisle. Unfortunately, the A6 had run out, but this didn't matter as we were about to reach a major milestone.
We finally made it to Scotland! This trip might actually be successful. Just standing in Gretna Green at the moment, famous destination for couples who wanted to elope and get married, because I think it's easier to do that in Scotland than it was in England at the time. So now we press on, we get as much distance as we can in this beautiful weather, now that everything's cleared up. Scotland, great place.
Reaching Scotland was significant for a few reasons. Whilst camping is legal here, provided you aren't on farmland, it was a major morale boost, and the Wetherspoons breakfast served a different kind of sausage. There was also a lot more countryside in Scotland, which at first seemed wonderful. I can't tell you how nice it was cycling on this open road next to a little stream, especially after the washout from this morning.
What a place. Gorgeous.
But by the time we reached this bridge in Paddock Hole, things started to sink in. Scotland was not like England. It was the time of day when we started to crave food, but there was nothing around. And I'm not talking Pork Ellis nothing from day one, I'm talking absolutely nothing. The nearest place was Lockerbie, 7 miles away in the wrong direction. Hardly something we could just pop round for. We even checked if we could get a takeaway from Lockerbie delivered to our bridge, and shockingly, this wasn't available either. We couldn't just wing it in Scotland. If we took the most direct route to our destination, we would starve in the wilderness. It turns out Scottish civilization only exists along a few roads, and so we made a route change. We had a quick meal from our snacks and turned towards the A7. But in my haste to escape the back roads, I made my biggest navigational mistake yet. We were passing by the village of Bentpath and we should have turned left here, but I missed the turn and carried straight on. By the time I realised, we had travelled over a mile in the wrong direction. Now that doesn't sound like much compared to the distances we've been doing, but having to backtrack a mile at the end of the day was a crushing blow to morale, and it didn't get much better from there. After passing through Bentpath, a village so small its Wikipedia entry only has 46 words, we entered a back road so remote that the Google Street View ends here. All I have is just a few photos I found on the internet. Turns out we entered the grounds of the Westerhall estate. There weren't many people around, but the ones that were there didn't look pleased to see us. There was an eerie silence to this area, with a few strange monuments standing on the hills. The vibe of these grounds can be summed up with one word, which I think Andy and Paul would agree with, and that's creepy. We were glad to see the back of it, but we were tired after all that cycling. We were still surrounded by farms though, so we pitched up by the side of the A7. Hard to believe we got lost in Scotland the same day we struck our tents in Yorkshire. We cycled around 69 miles today, which took us to 555 miles total. That's a little confusing because it's hard to check with our route change. Hopefully the A7 could take us back into civilization tomorrow, and away from the back gardens of the posh Scottish landowners. Having camped by the roadside, we started cycling almost immediately, and had a breakfast in a Howick Wetherspoons. This is where I first tried the oddity that is the lawn sausage. It was good, but a part of me regrets not going for the haggis this trip. Today we mostly stuck to the A7, and it didn't disappoint. Smooth roads with no need for navigation, what's not to love? We only
briefly left to check out the beautiful village of Stowe, where we had a spot of lunch.
We're making good progress today. I'm very happy about the sun. Should be able to press into Edinburgh by the end of the night, but we're just stopping in a little village called Stowe at the moment. We're having some lunch. I have to say, I'm very impressed with the range of food and offer at the post office.
The ultimate goal of the day was Edinburgh, but not for wild camping. Paul had some accommodation here, and we were determined to reach it before the end of the day. Cycling around a capital city has its ups and downs, especially Edinburgh as it's quite hilly. First you notice the traffic. You have these difficult turns around multi-lane roads one moment, and then you're squeezing between buses and learner drivers the next. There are also some very cool things around too.
The surprise mountain.
We cycled towards the Arthur's Seat Mountain until we entered Holyrood Park. Now this is a beautiful place to cycle round. The scenery here was fantastic. I was having a great time, even if I did have a chain jam on a roundabout.
Oh, awful place.
This is just a weird quirk of my bike which happens from time to time. I unjammed the chain and eventually we arrived at Paul's place. Our hosts were very gracious. We washed our clothes, had showers, and even made overnight oats. There's nothing like a few days of wild camping to make you really appreciate the things that most people would find mundane. We slept that night having cycled around 80 miles, reaching a total mileage of about 670. Again, this is a bit of a guess due to our Scottish route change. Either way, it was starting to feel like we were close, even though there was a lot of Scotland left to conquer. You know those days where I forget to record much footage? Well, I hope you like bridges. We left north past Edinburgh, taking one of 3 bridges over the River Forth. The bridge to our left was reserved for a motorway, and to our right was the train bridge.
It looks like the cycle path was an afterthought. It's not really connected to the road that well.
No, I bet it was.
I'm glad they did it.
This bridge stood out as being one of the longer ones we crossed. It's over 1 kilometre long, but not quite as long as the Severn Bridge into Wales. After the bridge, we approached one of Scotland's many beauty spots.
What is that? Giant stretch of water. Paul, do you know what that is? The water? Loch Leven? Nice. We've been climbing for the past hour and it's now time to pay it off. One glorious descent.
We descended a total height of about 1.1 Quantock Hills, and we were ready to speed down the road. The altitude change coming down the hill was incredible. I was shocked.
My ears popped. Oh my god, that was fantastic.
But the efficiency didn't stop there, and we were soon on the easy-to-navigate A9. Not all of this was cycle-friendly, but we managed to join neighbouring country roads when it got too big for us. We chanced upon a very interesting hut for dinner. In the car park of Dunkeld train station, we found The Craft, which did excellent food. It was a real party atmosphere. We also had a brief competition about who could eat the most wasabi peas. Turns out I couldn't compete with Andy and Paul on this one. Those peas were evil. We didn't cycle much further before stopping. We had chanced upon a wild camper's paradise.
It's been really good cycling around Scotland. It's been really sunny, it's been really beautiful, and you even find these amazing camp spots because you're allowed to wild camp anywhere. So we've chosen this lovely little forest for tonight. But here's where it gets interesting, because now we have a bit of drama added to the trip. Because we have booked transport out of John O'Groats on the Saturday, which means we have 3 more days to finish this cycle. So if we don't finish in 3 days, we are not finishing at all. So the race is on.
Today we had cycled 70 miles and reached mile 740. It might look like 3 days to completion would be an easy goal, but Scotland is huge. John of Groats was still over 200 miles away. All this time, Dom had been near, moving house to house up the country and hoping to rejoin when his knee healed. Sadly, this was as far north as he could come, and he still wasn't fit to ride. Our hopes of reuniting had to be abandoned. It was time to embark on the final phase of the journey. Today started out great. We awoke in a forest, the sun was out, and Google Maps promised a mostly flat day. Interestingly enough, it didn't feel very flat when we were actually on it, but the path was home to some interesting wildlife.
So apparently there are snakes in this country. God, it's windy.
We'd been quite lucky with the wind so far. This was the first time we were really noticing it. It was definitely making up for the lost time here.
It's incredibly windy up here. But after all, it is the highest point on the cycle network.
Our mostly flat day started with a grueling climb up to the highest cycle path in Great Britain. Google Maps was just a tiny bit wrong on that one. After all that climbing, we were ready for lunch and happened across a little place called the Snack Shack. I remember telling Andy and Paul about the time I ordered a big burger in the Driffield episode of York Review, and how it was really hard to cycle after it. I was then served a fairly large burger here and made the exact same mistake again. This threw me off my game for the rest of the day. We finished our ramble through the Cairngorms, bought a meal deal in Aviemore, and had a picnic in Carbridge. And, if I'm being honest, it probably couldn't support a car. It was hard to find a camping spot along the A9, so we just ended up pitching up on a footpath which suddenly appeared. It wasn't the best spot we ever stayed at. Despite the wind, hills, and a big burger, we managed another 81 miles, taking us to mile 821. At this rate, we were on track to finish by day 14. All we had to do was keep up the pace. In the early hours of the morning, we hopped back onto the A9 and cycled up to Inverness. We were happy to be out of there. The sunny Scottish cycling was behind us, and Scotland now seemed determined to make us suffer.
Cold today. There's loads of midges. They attacked last night. Swarming us.
For those who haven't camped in Scotland, Highland midges are tiny biting insects which descend in swarms upon unsuspecting campers. Female midges need a blood meal before they can go off to lay their eggs, and they're very good at sniffing out exposed skin. In the Highlands, mornings and evenings belong to the midges, so you need to get the tents up fast. We left Inverness on the Cystic Bridge, which warned of some difficult weather ahead.
Get ready for some strong side winds.
We definitely had to cycle single file on this one. They weren't very generous with space.
I kind of like Loch Ness a bit.
One of the rivers downstream actually connected to Loch Ness, but we didn't have time for sightseeing. We were now working to a very strict schedule. From there we pressed on to the rather significant village of Alness.
So we've just pulled into Alness, as you know. It's actually a very special moment now because we are officially less than 100 miles away from John of Groats. 99 on the map. Very exciting times. We can actually do this. I feel like we can do this. Alness seems to be an incredibly pretty place. It's crazy.
We had a quick lunch in a place which was almost called the Hairy Cow Bakery, and after taking in the sights, we were off again to another major bridge.
I'm a hazard. There's a train going past. Oh, it's a perfect shot.
I've watched this clip back a few times, and I genuinely don't know why I said that. Had my camera become too smudged to see the train? Was it just shoddy camera work on my end? Or, after 13 days of continuous cycling, was I just starting to hallucinate trains? On the last bridge we were only warned of side winds. This time we had a second obstacle to contend with.
Oh no!
This was an interesting area. The road continued for a long time before turning into the bridge.
Oh, I'm ready for the wind. To do what?
Just going to use the path. Use that path to your left.
Oh, that one? Yeah, I could ride on that.
After the bridge, we came across something I'd been waiting for a long time. It seemed like the end truly was in sight. This gave us all the motivation we needed to push even further, stopping to camp near Colgower.
Here we are, campsite on the last night, and there are midges absolutely everywhere. And it was like this in last night's campsite as well. It's just so awful. They can crawl through the nets, your face gets really itchy, they're biting you throughout the night. And when we woke up last night, they were still around. They're still around in the daytime. These are relentless little buggers, and they're following me around as I'm walking as well. It's not a good look. But tomorrow is the final day, and we're going to make a massive push for it. And we're in a great spot as well. We have a lovely little view of the sea here, just outside. We're near somewhere called Craig Beach, tiny town. We went a little bit past it, towards John and Groats. And so we have a good spot. Don't think it's going to rain again. It was raining last night. All my tents are sodden, even when we put them up just now. They're still wringing, they're still dripping wet. It's going to be a rough night, but there's only one more day of cycling ahead of us, and then it's done. We are making a break for it. This is now or never. We will make it to John O'Groats.
Strong words for a man in a discount beekeeper's hat, but I was right to be optimistic. Today we had cycled 81 miles and reached mile 902. We had only 54 miles to go. We were so close. We just needed to fight the tiredness in our legs for one more day. Surely we could do this. Surely.
It's the final day. Look at that beard. I haven't shaved since I started. You know, ever since Dom left, it's been up to me to wake up Andy and Paul, and the way that I do that is very obnoxious because they're in a different tent to me, all the way across the field. And the only way I can actually do it is to just... This is what I do. This is how I wake them up. Good morning! So over the top, so cheery, they must hate it. I can see, I can hear them screaming now. They're not in a good place. Alright, let's gear up and let's do this. Let's smash out the final day.
Waking up this morning turned out to be an uphill struggle, as we soon found ourselves climbing up even more Scottish hills.
We're so high up. We're supposed to be following the coastline. These Scottish hills, they're not giving us a break.
The weather was also being quite cruel. We were being hit by everything, all at once.
Hey, look, a sign. Welcome to Caithness.
Now there's been some questionable camera work in this video, but I think we can all agree that this is the best piece of footage so far.
These are horrible conditions. It's only 8:10 in the morning. We must have climbed about 800 feet in rain. It's really putting us through our paces. It's really making us earn these last 54 miles.
About an hour later, the terrain started to get flatter and the rain was starting to die down too.
This has dried up a bit.
also starting to get a bit more attention from the passing locals.
Friendly group, I think. Yeah. Is that Chicken Man? Oh, okay.
Chicken Man was a van driver we befriended in a local village. He ran an egg delivery service around here. I don't really remember meeting him though. I had to get Andy to remind me who he was. If you're watching Chicken Man, I wouldn't take it personally. I feel like we were all a bit mentally drained at this point in the journey. This area was quite remote, and we had trouble finding a village which was large enough to have an open cafe at this time in the morning. Luckily for us, we stumbled upon the conveniently positioned Lay Hay Tea Room.
About 34 miles left to go. It's bitterly cold today. I'm really glad I grew a beard for this. God, it's so cold in the north. It's so cold in Scotland. Can't believe it. Not much further now, not much further. We can do it. Let's go.
Now we're in Scotland.
Eventually we arrived in Wick, the last major town on our route.
Here we go. Truly impressive milestone. This is the most northern spoons in the country.
Wick was actually key to our escape plan. We were going to camp on the return journey from John Groats and head back here on the morning of day 15. Here we would collect a van from Hertz, drive the bikes home, and leave the van in a local depot. Even though there were only 3 of us, we still had to use the van because there wasn't enough space on the trains to get all our bikes on at once. We only booked this van when we woke up in Edinburgh. It's important to keep some sort of flexibility in your escape plan, just in case you have any unforeseen circumstances. And so we set off from Wick. All we had to do now was find a place to camp for the return journey, and then we could embark on the final stretch.
15 miles to go. The final 15. I have so much energy. I'm so excited.
Eventually we found a perfect spot for tonight's camp. There was a small beach in an area called Stane, and we could pitch up by these rocks away from the tide. This was a beautiful spot. There was even an active lighthouse on a nearby cliff, and we'd see it blinking periodically. Now that we knew where we'd be stopping tonight, there was only one thing left to do.
I have reason to believe this hill coming up is probably the last hill of the cycle. I can see islands. I can see the northern coast. I think we're near it. I think this is it.
And so we shot off, racing towards our ultimate goal. Little did I know, something on my helmet was starting to go wrong. It's hard to believe, but here, at this point in my recording, the memory card on my helmet became full. What are the chances, after recording so much footage on this camera, that I would run out of memory here, moments before we passed into John O'Groats? Why did I have to record so much footage of bridge crossings? Luckily for this video, I knew my helmet cam was bad with audio, so I pulled out my phone to get a live reaction.
We've made it! We made it to John O'Groats!
And so, at 5:30 on the final day, we pulled into John O'Groats.
It's over. I can't believe it's finally over. I don't know what I'm going to do with myself now. 14 days of cycling across the country on a bike which probably shouldn't have been doing that sort of distance. But here we are, John O'Groats, all the way from Land's End. You've crossed an entire country. England, Scotland, Wales, done, finished. Where do I go from here? I guess all that's left to do now is to finish York review. It's done!
For those interested, here's a summary of where we stopped each day. If you want to wild camp the full thing, you may want to go around Wigan or stop just outside of Edinburgh. Maybe you even have some friends on this route who won't mind some smelly cyclists crashing for a night. After this, we cycled back to Staine, stayed the night, and vanned home the next day. But this moment, right here, this was our moment. We had successfully completed one of the most difficult cycling challenges in the UK. And even though Dom wasn't with us, he was here in spirit. This trip wouldn't have happened without him. My bike may have had a few problems in the beginning, but it got me where I needed to go. It just goes to show you don't need an expensive road bike to go on adventures. You'd be surprised by what a cheap little road/mountain hybrid can do. But you'd be even more surprised by what you can do. I'm not a former Boy Scout or professional cyclist. I didn't even do Duke of Edinburgh. I'm just some guy with a bike, a tent, and some friends. And look at what we've done. We don't know what future challenges we may face, or how they'll even turn out. But that doesn't stop us from setting our own goals today, or celebrating all the little achievements along the way. We may have been at the top of Great Britain, but for me, in this moment, it felt like I was on top of the world.